Marvelous. Well done, everybody. So this afternoon, I want us to think a little bit about growing for purpose. So this morning, we thought, if you were with me, we thought about growing on purpose. Now, I just want to have a wee nudge with you about growing for purpose. And in a room like this, I think you will appreciate this conversation. Just to remind you of what we did this morning, because I know it's been a long time since we talked last time, and we can forget very, very quickly. I'm a great believer in repetition. And we've looked at this particular beautiful verse, unique to the Gospel of Luke. Remember what I said this morning? When a gospel writer gives you something unique, just lean in a little bit harder and ask the question, why does he say that and the others don't? And follow the breadcrumbs and see what's there. And we looked at this idea that Jesus grew in wisdom, stature, favor with God and with men. And the word to grow there is a really gorgeous word. It's prokopto. This idea of forward cut. Forward cut. And here's a good image, I think, which sort of grabs the word, because it's hard to translate that into English. So that's why some translations have grow and some translations will have increase, because it's a hard word to translate in for us. But the image behind it is the idea of wanting to get somewhere and then cutting a path to get to it. All right? It's a cool word. And Dr. Luke introduces that really specifically about Jesus. This is not the sort of common, natural word for growth. This is a very specific, deliberate image that he's trying to carve out. So he wants you to understand that when we look at Jesus in 3:21 at the baptism, filled with the Spirit, ready to go into his purpose, actually it's because in the years previous, Jesus has grown. And that's a big idea for you and me in grabbing Jesus and the incarnation, but also it's a massive idea in discipleship and personal self-leadership and growing. This has been a life-changing message for me. Genuinely, this is a game-changing idea. 25 years ago when I was studying this and stumbled across this, I thought, my goodness, why have I never seen this before? And it has literally changed the way I live. So I live my life to a 252 pattern. I try to ensure that regularly I am committing myself to growing in wisdom, to growing in stature, to growing in favor with God and favor with man. I try to frame my life around those four ideas. And two gorgeous ideas in the Word. So Dr. Luke does a bit of heavy lifting in the Word, which sort of gets lost in our English translation, is that he's suggesting to us very strongly that Jesus grew intentionally. This is not just accidental happening to him. This is happening because he's really being intentional about it. And then secondly, and this is crucial in our understanding, it's continuous. So you can check this out, but the parsing of the word carries with it the idea of a continuous action. Now again, in my English Bible, it's hard to tell when that's happening, but that is definitely there. And so Dr. Luke's showing us something quite amazing. And our little conclusion this morning was, when no one was looking, Jesus grew. So that when everyone was looking, Jesus was ready. All right? Now that's a big idea. And I would suggest to you that the hidden years of Jesus are as amazing as the public ministry of Jesus. What Jesus pulls off in those 18 hidden years is spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. But we never talk about it because, well, there's not a lot of detail about what happened in those years. We've got some clues. We can patch the story together. But Dr. Luke really helps us. He says, actually, whatever you don't know, here's what you do know. That Jesus in those 18 years grew deliberately and continuously in wisdom, stature, favor with God, favor with men. And we concluded with these two ideas that growth starts with posture. It's really an attitude. It's not about where you are. It's about who you are. And that's a big idea for a discipleship context. And secondly, growth works through process. Process, as far as biblical narrative concerned, is not about taking you to somewhere, but process is part of the somewhere. All right? So when Jesus was cutting those stones, that was part of the somewhere. When Jesus was building that table, that was part of the somewhere. When Jesus was putting food on the table of his family, that was part of the somewhere. Come on now. When Jesus attended synagogue on Shabbat, that's part of the somewhere. All right? It's all, and when we infuse the ordinary with purpose, when we allow the process to be infused with purpose, it transforms the ordinary moments. So that job I'm in, and I wish I had a better job, if I infuse that job with the sense that the process connected to that job is part of my journey in serving the Lord and honoring the Lord, then suddenly it allows me to look at that job differently. It allows me to look at my postcode differently. It allows me to look at my local church differently. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy, but it means it infuses the ordinary with purpose. Because we understand that most of our most important moments happen in the ordinary. Like I have to cut the grass. Take my sausage dogs for a walk. Salami and pepperoni. Right? Pick up their poo. Angels don't pick up the poo. I have to pick up their poo, right? Come on. I have to pay my mortgage. I have to... So my life is filled with ordinaries. Here's the danger. If I don't understand this properly, I sort of look at that ordinary stuff devalued, because this is the really important stuff here. But what the Bible wants to teach me is, John, actually, the ordinary stuff that's happening in between this cool stuff is just as important as this stuff. And actually, that's really helped transform my commitment to the ordinary, my commitment to the process. Does that make sense to you? So some of you right now, you've got the call of God on your life. You've got something exciting you know that Jesus is saying to you or said to you about your future. Yet you're sort of stuck in like ordinariness right now. Like your life's a bit routine, mundane. Even, dare I say it, in such esteemed company, a bit boring. Right? But actually, Jesus would have had lots of boring days. That's not sacrilege. That's just life. Jesus would have had lots of mundane days. Jesus would have had ordinary, routine moments. But he grew. Come on now, he grew. Now that's the trick there. That's what 252 is trying to say to us. Allow God's purpose to invade the process so that the process becomes invested. Yeah? So that the ordinary becomes opportunity. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. You sure? Yeah. Okay. So here we go. 20 minutes together and we're done. Well done, everybody. It's a bit warm in here, isn't it? Are you okay? Yeah. If you think you're going to fall over because of the heat, please feel free to stand up. If you are going to fall asleep, try and do it with your eyes open. And the only thing I would ask if you fall asleep is do not snore. All right, if you snore, that's the only moment I'm going to have to intervene. Okay, so there we go. So here's the last wee thought for you. Growth thrives off purpose. Now, it's not essential that we have purpose to help us to grow, but there's no doubt that when you attach a sense of purpose to the growing process, it energizes it. All right, so let me give you an example. I could just wake up one day and think, wouldn't it be great to speak Mandarin? Right? I've always wanted to speak Mandarin. So I grab an online course and think, let's try and learn how to speak. Any Mandarin speakers in the room? Are you a Mandarin speaker? Come on, we have one. Right, I'll talk to you later. So wouldn't it be cool to just speak Mandarin? Like a lot of people on the earth can speak that language. I could communicate with over 1.3 or 4 billion people probably if I could speak Mandarin. Wow. Now here's the problem. If I just want to learn Mandarin, just because it would be cool to learn Mandarin, then I've got to be deeply motivated. All right? And my motivation may or may not carry me to do that. But imagine if attached to learning Mandarin was a real passionate love for example, China. So actually, my motivation for learning Mandarin is not Mandarin. My motivation for learning Mandarin is China. You see what I mean? Yeah. So suddenly a love for China or a love for people groups in the world that will connect to the language of Mandarin suddenly becomes an energizing fact to learning Mandarin. Yes? One of the hardest things we do in churches to try and disciple people to grow is that actually we tend to focus on the mechanics of growing, and if we're not careful, we just say to people, right, come on, you need to read the Bible, you need to do this, you need to do that, and we focus on the mechanics, and we forget sometimes the importance that in order for people to really fall in love with reading the Bible and engaging with community and learning to do the discipleship things that we want, there's got to be a purpose within them that pulls them towards those things, right? So investing in the mechanics alone will generally not help people to grow because they'll get a bit fed up with or bored with or lose energy with the mechanics. But if they've got a reason to read the Bible, not just because I tell them, if they've got a reason to train. I mean, I was listening to Angie, and I wanted to sign up for that course. Angie's amazing, isn't she? You know, you're going, Angie, where have you been all my life? You're like incredible. There's something about Angie that you're drawn to her, and you're going, I'd love to sit in a class led by Angie. She sounds amazing as a person. But actually, I need a stronger motivation than even Angie. I need a deeper sense of purpose to motivate that growing. So it's possible to learn Mandarin just because it would be a cool language to learn. But if I attach a love for China to Mandarin, it energizes the process. Yes. It's a bit like that with our discipleship journey with Jesus. It's a bit like that with our walk with Jesus as individuals. That actually, the mechanics of walking with Jesus itself, these are brilliant things, but without a deeper sense of purpose to them, the danger is it becomes about the thing we're doing rather than the reason we're doing it. You with me?
Yes.
Now think about that, about the people you're discipling. Think about that with young people in our Christian unions. What a great talk today on that. Think about our children we're teaching. What we want is not just say, hey, here's 5 cool things, 5 cool disciplines you can do to help you grow as a Christian. That's brilliant. But if they don't have a pull, so when the lights go out and we go home and they go home, if they don't have a pull inside them, sort of a reason, then the danger is these cool ideas simply become things they do. And then it becomes about the thing they're doing. Once that happens, we're in trouble. We've all been there, haven't we?
Yeah.
Where it's become about the thing we're doing and not about the reason for the thing we're doing. Come on now.
Yes.
Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. So, did that happen to Jesus? Well, it sort of does. When we read 2:52, in the context that went before, we find an amazing statement from Jesus. This, again, I often describe these statements as hidden in plain sight. We sort of miss this. This is awesome, right? Absolutely awesome. Now look at this. Didn't you know Jesus said that I had to be in my Father's house? Now here's the problem. It doesn't say that. Okay, now we have a problem here because the sort of literal translation of the text, as Jesus says it and is recorded by Dr. Luke, doesn't say that. Okay, here's closer to what it would actually say. In the of the Father of me. Right, that's how it reads, literally. It's very, very difficult translation. So what the translators have done there is, none of that makes sense. So what they've done is, and this happens a lot in your Bible translations, they've not just translated, they've interpreted. Yeah. So that's why you'll find sometimes little bits in your Bible that strictly aren't there, but what's happened is the translators are going, if we wrote this the way it really is written, you'd go, what? So what they do is they sometimes translate, but also interpret. So they add some stuff in to help us understand what they think is being said. Now this is a classic one. So actually some of your Bibles will have, didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? And some will have, doing my Father's business. All right? Now, which one's right? Well, actually, technically, neither. Okay. What Jesus literally is saying is something like this. Here's a little translation for you to maybe work on and think about. It was necessary for me to be in the things of my Father. That's sort of close to the literalism of the text. I am in the things of my Father. Now, that's hard. What does that mean? And that's why sometimes, well, he's in the temple, so he's in the Father's house, and the temple's associated with the purpose of God. Or he's about his Father's business. That's sort of close to that. And that's why you get this little difference. But the point is this, and I want you to see this. I say only that in case you hunt that down. So I wanted you to see that before you go there. The point is this, however. When Jesus leaves the temple and goes home to Nazareth, he has in himself the things of the Father. That's the point. So the reason he hung around in Jerusalem and put his mum and dad under pressure trying to find him, right? The reason he hung around was because he was glimpsing, understanding, grasping, having clarity on the things of the Father. So he's now hanging around in the temple, a space associated with the presence of God. He's hanging around there because he's caught the heart of the Father. Right? Now hold that thought and go to 2:52. Right? As he's leaving Jerusalem, the last recorded words of Dr. Luke about Jesus are, he grew in wisdom, stature, favour with God, favour with men. Now, if you attach 2:52 to 2:49, boom. So when it says that Jesus grew in wisdom, stature, favour with God, favour with, these are not random statements. These are statements of growth attached to the things of the Father. You see that? Yeah. Now this is really important. If you can connect that dot, you can hunt this down for yourself. Jesus isn't just growing for growing's sake. He's not just growing in wisdom because it would be cool to be smart. Right? He's not just growing in stature because it's good to look after your body. He's not just growing in favor with God because, he's called to be a spiritual rabbi, right? These things are brilliant in their own right. But the text very carefully connects the things Jesus is growing in to the reason Jesus is growing in them. You see that? He's growing in these areas because he has an understanding of the things of the Father. Now, if we in our lives can get a sense of the things of the Father, whatever that means to you, whatever that means to me, as a general Christian community, there'll be a whole bunch of things of the Father that are common to all of us, right? It's all in the Bible, and me and you connect to those things. So there are common things of the Father that are common to all Christians. But then there are things of the Father that are about you. Your call. Your purpose. So I would argue when Jesus took a hold of me as a teenager, I became aware of the things of the Father specifically to do with John Andrews. Right? And it changed the direction of my life. It changed some of the decisions I made about my life. And it shaped some of the reasons I did what I did and some of the growth processes I went on because I got a sense that the Father specifically wanted something for me. Are you with me? So there are some things me and you can grow in because generally speaking, there's a whole bunch of things from the Father that we need to learn about and know that he wants and loves. But then for some of you in the room, there's going to be growth that's connected to the things of the Father specifically for you. And an awareness of those things will change not only how you grow, but what you grow in. Make sense? You're doing well. I know it's late, and you're fighting your lunch as well as a whole day of fatigue. So well done. You're doing great, but I'm hoping that makes sense to you. So let me summarize it.
So repeat that last line again, would you mind? Sorry.
Which bit?
This will change how you grow and...
So an awareness of the things of the Father will change not only how you grow, but the things you grow in. So let's go back to Mandarin. If I really do believe, for example, the things of the Father for me is to go to China, then I need to learn Mandarin. You don't need to learn Mandarin. Why would you learn Mandarin? Okay? I need to learn it. Why? Because the things of the Father for me is taking me towards, literally, or in terms of people groups, China. That's an example. Does that make sense to you? All right? So it changes not only how you grow, it'll change your energy towards the growing, but it'll also differentiate the areas you need to grow. And depending on what the things are will depend on the areas you need to grow. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Is that okay? Well done. I'm glad I remembered. Right then. So a couple of things that sort of help us with this are because helps us to become. When I, raising my children, my children are all adults now. My youngest is 23. We have 3 children. And they would often do things when they were younger. And I would say, what'd you do that for? And they'd go, because. I'm waiting for the rest of the sentence, right? Because what? Because, right? Now, I get there's a because. What is the because? And actually, when it comes to growing for purpose, not growing on purpose, but growing for purpose, a because really helps. Right? I've noticed this. When you try to disciple someone to follow Jesus who doesn't get Jesus, it's virtually impossible. Or they might get church, they like your church, they like the music, they like the worship, the cool environment, great place, lovely people, but they haven't quite got Jesus yet. And you're trying to disciple someone to follow Jesus who hasn't quite got Jesus. It's like dragging a dead elephant up a hill. And sometimes we just have to have the honest commitment to go, look, I'm trying to disciple you towards something that's never going to work. This is never going to work because you don't have the because. You need to have a because, right? So the because helps us to become. Or put another way, a clear why will inform what we do and how we do it. Now that why can be generic. What do I mean? I mean, as a Christian, there's a why common to us all. There's a whole bunch of why in the Bible you don't need to pray about. You just need to read and do. Okay? So, you're looking at me funny. Okay, so example, helping the poor. I don't need to pray about that. In fact, when Christians pray about it, they normally stop helping the poor. I don't need to pray about helping the poor. David this morning said about going to, I don't need to pray about going. The only bit of prayer attached to going is there anything specifically you want me to go to? But I should be going all the time. Are you with me? So that's a why that's sort of general to us all. But then there's the things of the Father why. Maybe someone in this room, have you got a things of the Father why? Okay. So the question might be, what is your because? Or what is your why? Jesus had a why. I'm in the things of the Father. As a good Jew who knew the Torah, he would have a whole bunch of why. But the things of the Father wasn't just good Torah. The things of the Father was the purpose of the Father for him. Are you with me? Yes. There's a general why and a specific why. And for people of like you in this room, I'm guessing there may be some specific whys in the room. And the specific why is going to determine not only how you grow, but in what areas you grow. Yes? Clarity in your why empowers our yes and legitimizes or no. So there are some things the Father's going to ask of me and you that will empower a yes. So, sorry, I keep picking on Mandarin, but it helps us, right? Well, I think it helps me. Okay. So I'm going to China, yes. Yes to all things that are going to help me prepare to cross the border into China. But that also empowers me to say no to a whole bunch of stuff that could be really cool, but irrelevant. Wouldn't it be cool to speak Portuguese? Yeah, but not relevant to me. I need to learn Mandarin. Why? Because I'm going to China. As far as I know, they don't speak much Portuguese in China. Who knows? They may well do, but I don't know, right? Right? So suddenly I can say no to Portuguese without losing any sleep or being guilty because I'm saying yes to Mandarin. And the reason I'm saying yes to Mandarin is because I've got some clarity about my why. In the Christian church, no can be one of the hardest words to say because the Christian community generally starts with yes. We're generally speaking, we're yes people. We want to say yes to Jesus and yes to each other. But actually, there are sometimes you've got to learn to say no in order to allow you to live your yes. A no is not always a word of rebellion. Sometimes no is a word of purpose. Someone in the room needs to hear that. It's okay to say no. I say no to tons of stuff because it's not my purpose. It's not the things of the Father for me. I've got a finite resource time. I've got finite resources financially. I've got finite resources physically. I can't say yes to everything. I have to say yes only to the things of the Father. People and caliber of the people in this room, that's a big issue we've got to grapple with in our journey. Does that make sense? Yeah. My time has almost gone. Jesus grew in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God, in favor with men. If you examine these 4 areas, and then you look at the ministry of Jesus, all of these 4 areas connect to the ministry of Jesus. Now, I haven't got time to go into that, but if you pick up 252, I try to show you how Jesus grows in these areas, and I try to show how we can grow in those areas, and I try to connect the growth to the ministry of Jesus. But if you look at all of these areas, they all ultimately connect to stuff that Jesus does in his 3 years of ministry. None of this growing is wasted. All of this growing manifests itself in the ministry of Jesus. Now, even if Jesus didn't have a specific why, these would be cool areas to grow in, right? But with a sense of why from the Father, these areas take on a whole new level of energy and purpose. Suddenly, memorizing Leviticus becomes important. No joke, no joke. Jesus quotes the Bible many times in the Gospels, and he only quotes it once from the text. Every other time Jesus quotes the Bible, he quotes it from memory. Scholars in the days of Jesus, people like Nicodemus that Jesus bumps into, could probably recite most of Torah off by heart. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. If you were a serious scholar and you had to look up the scroll in a theological debate, you're out of the game. All right? So actually, when Jesus is pouring over Leviticus, suddenly Leviticus becomes super important. Why? Because he's in the things of the Father. You see that? See how it changes it? It becomes even more important than just Leviticus. By the way, the rabbis would often teach children to read and write from Leviticus. The first book of the Torah they're taught is Leviticus. Most Christians hate Leviticus. There we are. So when you look at the ministry of Jesus, all of these things land. As you read the Gospels now, you'll see wisdom. You'll see his physical stature enable him to do amazing things up and down the length and breadth of Israel. You'll see him walking in intimacy with the Father to the extent that he says, I don't do anything on my own. I only do what the Father tells me to do. Wow. We see him growing in favor with people. The common people heard him gladly. Why? Because they liked him. Why? Because he was good with them. Where did he learn that? In Nazareth. All of these cool ideas that Luke introduces all connect to the ministry of Jesus. He's given us a model of discipleship. He's given us a model of life. That if you want to get to the Jordan, filled with the Spirit, and going in your ministry, actually that's not just going to happen randomly. That is the result of a process towards something. When nobody's looking, Jesus is growing. So that when everybody's looking, Jesus is ready. Last quote, and I'll let you go. Our time is gone. Andy Stanley says this in his book, Visioneering. Everybody ends up somewhere. Only a few people end up somewhere on purpose. Everyone in this room will end up somewhere. As followers of Jesus, we're asked to think about not just the somewhere randomly, but is that somewhere attached to a purpose for our lives, so that we end up somewhere, like Jesus, on purpose. Somewhere that reflects the purpose and the character of God. So as I leave you, with purpose in mind, what areas of growth require both our attention and intention? As a follower of Jesus, there's a whole bunch of things that are common to all. But maybe there is a why in you. Maybe there is a because in you. Maybe there is a things of the Father in you that requires extra attention and specific intention. If that's you in the context of your journey, I would ask you, just like Jesus, not to brush that to the side, but bring that into the center and allow the things of the Father to become the focal point and to become the catalyst for not only what you grow in, but how you grow in them.